This is a short video about coding and qualitative data analysis. I will briefly cover what coding is, then go through 3 key types of coding, followed by some examples, and finally some concluding thoughts. When you look into the literature, you will find several definitions of coding, which can feel quite overwhelming. The best one I have come across so far is the one by Cresswell, which goes, coding is the process of analyzing qualitative data by taking them apart to see what they yield before putting them back together in a meaningful way. What I like about this definition is that it highlights that coding is about organizing and making sense of the data. And that already tells us that coding is a process with multiple steps. So it is not that you say, okay, I do the coding and then it's a straightforward process. Instead, you have to make a lot of decisions along the way. And what decisions you have to make and what those steps are will really depend on your project. NVivo can facilitate your coding, but it will not tell you what steps you have to take or what decisions you have to make. So like other qualitative data analysis softwares, it is quite flexible. There are 3 key types of coding that you can consider when planning and carrying out your analysis. The first one is topic coding. Here you decide on topics and then you create for each of those topics a code, or we call them in NVivo nodes. Then you go through your material and you assign everything that links to a topic to its node. And this is quite useful in the beginning of your analysis because it can help you to structure your data. Secondly, then case coding, which is similar, but here you create nodes not for a topic but for your cases. So the cases are your units of analysis. That can be a person or a place or an event. So for example, if it is a person, you then might want to code everything that person said, everything that is being said about that person to this node. And again, this is useful for organizing your data into more manageable chunks. Thirdly, then, analytical coding. This is not so much about how you want to structure or organize your data, but how you want to analyze your data. And we can distinguish here 2 key approaches, a deductive and an inductive one. The deductive approach is where you have your notes derived from a theory or theories or another pre-existing framework, and then you look at your data and you assign the relevant content to then those pre-established nodes. Inductive coding, on the other side, is where your notes and your coding framework is derived from the data. So it is not that you look at your data with a coding framework in mind, but you develop your coding framework through looking through your data. But in practice, you might actually do a bit of both. I will now share 3 examples which hopefully illustrate how one can combine these types of coding and how they link to some social scientific theories and approaches. The first one is about grounded theory, and there is a lot we can say about grounded theory, but all I want to say here that it is common for exploratory studies where we know little about a topic and where the emphasis is on theory generation. And if we want to generate a theory, we do not have a pre-existing coding framework, but we want to derive it from the data. So therefore the emphasis here is on inductive coding. However, I spoke to some colleagues who work with grounded theory, and they shared with me that in the very beginning they also undertake some topic or case coding just to organize their data. The second analysis is about framework analysis, which is an approach with clearly defined stages of analysis, which is useful where we have preset questions and a very short time frame. The emphasis is here on deduction rather than on induction, but there can also be some inductive coding. There are 4 key stages that are relevant for coding. The first one is about the familiarization of data, so one reads through the data and see what the data yields. In the second stage, then one does some coding, and here it then depends on the project and on the questions whether this is more deductive or inductive, but one does not look at the entire text but only at a certain proportion of it. Based on this coding of the second stage, at the third stage, one then develops an analytical framework that is then applied in the fourth stage. And this fourth stage is then deductive coding. So here we then have the pre-existing framework that we then apply. Finally, thematic analysis, which is a very flexible method that is used to identify common themes, which can be topics, ideas, or patterns of meanings. And it is flexible because you have the option to generate your themes from theory or from theories, and then the emphasis is on deductive coding, at least for the parent nodes. The children nodes can also be identified inductively, it depends on what you decide to do. On the other side, you can also derive the themes from the data, and then your coding framework and your nodes are generated in a more inductive way. I hope it became clear that there is not one right or one wrong way of coding data. Instead, and this is my key takeaway message, your approach to coding needs to be tailored to your project. So the steps that you take and the decisions that you make, they need to fit your research. Qualitative data analysis software like NVivo will also not tell you how to code your data, but it can facilitate your coding no matter whether you want to do topic coding, case coding, deductive or inductive coding. At the same time, NVivo also allows you to un- and recode data. That means that your first attempt doesn't need to be perfect, and you can kind of rethink and then redo your coding. But you need to keep in mind that that can become quite time consuming if you wait too long. I hope you found this video useful. Do leave me a comment and tell me what you think. And don't forget to check out my 2 tutorials that offer step-by-step guidance on how to code in NVivo 12.